I was on my way to tell Silas Crowe that I was pregnant when I got into a terrible car accident. Clinging to life, the first person I called was Silas. But he didn't even hesitate. He hung up. That single moment of indifference cost me everything. I wasn't rushed to the hospital in time, and the baby, who hadn't even fully formed, was gone. On the drive home from the hospital, Silas finally called. "Sorry, Nina," he said, his tone casual, as if nothing had happened. "I was tied up in a meeting and couldn't take your call earlier." I let out a hollow laugh, masking the bitterness clawing at my chest. "It's fine," I replied coolly. But just 5 minutes before his call, I'd seen a photo on social media posted by his secretary, Elise Hart. In it, Silas was crouched beside Elise's young son, helping him pick out children's toys. His expression was warm and tender, the kind of look I'd always hoped he'd reserve for me. When I didn't push further, Silas seemed to relax. His voice softened, almost playful. "Be good and wait at home for me, okay? When I'm done with work, we'll go check out those houses together. We've been together for 5 years, and last month we'd finally decided to tie the knot." The wedding was set for the 1st of next month. When I found out I was pregnant, I'd been so excited to share the news. I even planned to suggest we start preparing a nursery, but now none of that mattered because I wasn't marrying him anymore. That night, I waited for Silas in the living room, determined to end things. Hours passed, and I ended up dozing off on the couch. It wasn't until the middle of the night that the doorbell jolted me awake. When I opened the door, there was Elise, holding up a drunken Silas. "I'm so sorry, Nina," she said, her tone dripping with fake sincerity. Silas was going to come straight home, but I begged him to stay for a drink. "Please don't take it the wrong way. It's just, my ex-husband showed up and caused a scene. I was scared and needed someone to keep me company." Elise and Silas had been childhood friends, practically inseparable. Everyone said that if she hadn't left the country years ago, Silas never would have ended up with me. Now she was back. And despite being a single mom, Silas' feelings for her hadn't changed one bit. When Elise mentioned she needed a job, Silas immediately created a position for her at Crowe Holdings, making her the head of the secretarial department. I pressed my lips together, stepping aside to let Elise drag Silas inside. The moment Silas hit the couch, he instinctively reached out and pulled Elise into his arms. "Silas, stop it. Let go!" Elise shouted, but she made no real effort to pull away. Eventually, Silas seemed to regain some semblance of awareness and loosened his grip. Elise stepped back just enough to maintain appearances, her voice trembling with calculated vulnerability. "I didn't mean for this to happen. Please don't be mad, okay?" I nodded, my voice calm. "It's fine. You should go home." Elise blinked, clearly caught off guard by my lack of reaction. After a moment of hesitation, she turned and left. I looked down at Silas, passed out and reeking of cheap perfume, and knew there was no point in trying to talk tonight. I turned to leave, but his hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. "Nina," he slurred, his words heavy with alcohol. "I just hugged Elise, and you're not even jealous?" The sickly sweet scent of his cologne mixed with the perfume clinging to his clothes made my stomach churn. I pulled my hand free, keeping my voice steady. "Didn't you always say you two are just friends? Friends hug, it's no big deal. Why would I care?" In the past, whenever I got upset about how close he was to Elise, that was always his excuse. Hearing it from me now seemed to catch him off guard. I didn't wait for his reaction. I turned and headed upstairs. The next day, I met up with my best friend, Lila Brooks, at a cafe. "Lila," I began, "does your offer to take me abroad for work still stand?" She raised an eyebrow, setting her coffee down. "Of course. Why? Are you finally considering it?" I nodded without hesitation. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Seriously? You've been so adamant about staying here because of Silas. What changed? Did you two fight?" I shook my head, unwilling to drag my personal problems into this. "No." Sensing I didn't want to elaborate, Lila didn't press further. Just then, the door to the cafe swung open, and in walked Silas, with Elise and her son. Elise spotted me first. Her face drained of color as she quickly hid behind Silas, clutching her child. "Silas," she whispered, "Nina's here too." "What are you so scared of?" I said, my lips curving into a cold smile. "I'm not going to bite." Silas' expression darkened. He told me earlier he was meeting an important client. Now, caught red-handed spending his day off with Elise and her son, he looked rattled. He walked over, trying to act unfazed. "Nina, don't overthink this. I just finished a meeting and decided to grab a coffee. I ran into Elise by chance. You're the mean lady trying to take my daddy away." Elise's son, Jude, glared at me, his childish accusation laced with venom. Elise quickly covered his mouth. "Jude." Her words might have sounded like a scolding, but the smugness in her tone was impossible to miss. I had no patience for their pitiful performance. Rising from my seat, I grabbed my bag and turned to leave with Lila. Silas grabbed my arm, his brow furrowing in frustration. "Nina, are you mad? I told you it was just a coincidence. Why do you always have to overreact? You're so jealous." This was his favorite tactic, turning the tables on me whenever he had no excuse for his actions. He'd make it about my jealousy, twisting things until I doubted myself. For years, I let him convince me I was the problem and that I was the unreasonable one. But what kind of man spent this much time alone with another woman? Jealous? Lila cut in before I could respond, her voice sharp. "A married man who's glued to another woman 24/7? Anyone would think she is the wife, not Nina." Grabbing my hand, Lila shot Silas one last glare before pulling me out of the cafe. After that day, Silas decided to give me the silent treatment, or as he liked to call it, a cooling-off period. In the past, whenever he pulled this stunt, I'd always cave. No matter how badly he'd wronged me, I'd swallow my pride, grovel, and beg for us to make up. That was when he'd smugly lay down terms, as if I should feel grateful. His conditions were always the same, accepting his one-on-one outings with Elise, their dinners, their drinks, their whatever else friends don't do together. And why wouldn't he keep playing this card? It had always worked. He must have thought this time would be no different. Too bad for him. I wasn't cooling off. I was done. After confirming plans with Lila to leave the country next Sunday, I sent my resignation email to HR. Since everyone at the company knew about my relationship with Silas, HR didn't dare process my resignation without running it by him first. It didn't take long before Silas stormed into my office. "Why are you quitting? You've been doing great here," he demanded, his tone sharp. I paused mid-pack, about to answer, but Elise walked in, cutting me off with her sugary voice. "Silas, don't be so harsh," she cooed. "You'll scare Nina. I bet she's resigning because she's getting married soon and wants to be a full-time housewife." Her comments seemed to hit the perfect note. Silas' expression softened as he reached out and ruffled my hair, his tone suddenly warm and gentle. "You're amazing, you know that?" I was actually trying to figure out how to suggest this. "I think it's great, this quit and be a housewife thing. You'll never have to worry about a thing. I'll take care of you." A housewife. That word hit me like a gut punch. From the moment we got together, I'd made it clear to Silas that I loved working. I loved the thrill of building something for myself. He had promised to support that ambition, and I had helped him build his empire, working tirelessly as his right hand. And now, after all that, he wanted me to drop it all because he'd decided I should. I pressed my lips together and said nothing, letting him believe I agreed. Later that evening, to my surprise, Silas pulled up to my office in his car. "I'll drive you home," he said, as if this were something he always did. I blinked, stunned. It had been so long since he'd offered me a ride that I couldn't even remember the last time. Ever since Elise returned, I wasn't allowed in his car. Apparently, Elise thought it should be for her, and her alone. I almost refused out of habit, but then Silas added, "Our wedding gown is ready. The shop called earlier. They want us to come in for the fitting." Right. The dress. If I was going to cancel the wedding, I'd have to deal with the gown. I hesitated for a moment before finally getting in the car. At the bridal shop, the sales assistant's expression shifted the moment she saw Silas and me walking together. Her face turned pale as she muttered under her breath, "She's not the one from last time." Her voice was quiet, but I heard it loud and clear. Silas, still glued to his phone, didn't catch it. Without looking up, he waved her off. "Take her to try it on." The moment I slipped into the gown, I knew something was wrong. The waistline was noticeably larger, almost a full size too big. My measurements hadn't changed since the dress was ordered, and this shop was known for its precision. Mistakes like this didn't happen unless. I approached the assistant to ask, but she took a step back, her tone dripping with disdain. "You really shouldn't go after things that aren't yours," she said coldly. "Just like this gown, it doesn't belong to you, so of course it doesn't fit." Her words stunned me. Before I could respond, she shoved me towards Silas, forcing him to inspect the dress. Silas didn't even glance up from his phone. "Looks fine," he said dismissively. "Just make sure it's the same as last time." Last time. I stepped out of the gown and handed it back. The assistant asked if I wanted to take it home or have it delivered. I shook my head and said flatly, "Neither." "Throw it out." "I don't want it." She gawked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You can't be serious. If you cancel now, we're not refunding you." I nodded without a word and walked out of the fitting room. That night, back home, my phone buzzed with a series of angry messages. Unknown number, feeling high and mighty, huh? Must be nice being a mistress, tossing out a dress worth thousands like it's trash. It took me a moment to process the accusation before I realized the texts were from the sales assistant. Unknown number, karma will catch up to you. Unknown number, you better think twice before life catches up with you. I couldn't help but laugh. I replied by sending her a photo of my engagement picture with Silas. This time, she didn't text back. I thought that was the end of it, until the next day, when Silas and Elise's names started trending online. Shocking. Crowe Holdings CEO caught cheating with his divorced secretary. Scandal at bridal shop. Curious, I clicked on the article. Attached was a video. The thumbnail alone was enough to make my stomach churn. It was footage from that bridal shop.